I do not say this lightly, but this place is seriously just insane. So welcome to Dubrovnik, the Pearl of the Adriatic, and I can't wait to show you around. Let's get started, shall we? Well, here we are. Just over my left shoulder is one of two drawbridge entrances into one of the most beautiful old towns in the world, and I can't wait to show you it. Let's go.
With the usual early start, we head through Ploče Gate as the city just begins to wake, and views over the harbour are blessed with the golden glimmer of the rising sun. As I stroll over Revelin Bridge, I find myself between one of the external fortresses guarding the east and the magnificent limestone city walls, which still encircle one of the most wonderfully preserved medieval cities in the world. And just a couple of minutes walking later, we will arrive to the centrepiece of Dubrovnik. Passing by the harbour along the way, in beautiful solitude, we then arrive into the heart of the old town. With the somewhat simplistic but still cutely ornate St Blaise's Church, almost empty streets leading onto golden cathedral domes, wonderful 15th century stonework, and a main street which is yet to be enchanted with life. And to think, there is still so much more yet to come. But for now, I soak up the views from Stradun, where ubiquitous limestone walls are charmed with green window shutters, and separated by steep alleyways full of character.
Never will you ever see Dubrovnik Old Town this quiet, unless you come out at 6 AM like me. And fun little fact, this street here, the main street, cuts through as a straight line. It used to be like a boggy marsh, and then it got filled in the 11th century, and then I think the Venetians paved over it with limestone in the 13th century. But I think what we're going to do is soon the Old Town walls are going to be opening, so I think we're going to head up there. See you there. Well, here we are, we've made it onto the city walls and it looks incredible already, but my god, €40. But a little handy tip, the day pass for Dubrovnik is €40 I think for 1 day, and this includes the city walls, so it's worth getting it even just for the 1 day. But anyway, let's head along here, it looks insane.
We enter the city walls for it opening at 8 AM and tactically choose an entrance on the coastal side on the southeast by the harbour. It certainly paid off. I couldn't believe that we were actually lucky enough to have it all to ourselves. And so we skirt along the eastern flank of the city walls, immersed in nothing but the coastal breeze, the sound of lovely birds and lightly crashing waves. And views up onto Mount Srd above the city tease of our next adventure. Meanwhile, it somehow seems that the further we walk, the more incredible the views become. It's clear that the city walls are an absolute must to truly appreciate how special this city is.
Tell you what, never in my life did I think I'd be saying that it would be worth €40 to walk up some walls.
Surprisingly from here, it got even better. But if you want a more complete walkthrough, I'll be releasing a full video for the city walls linked at the end of this video. And after a couple of hours rest, next on the list is Mount Srd as promised, which means heading up through the narrow steep streets of the old town to where we're promised something rather special. There is an option to get a cable car up, but do we want to spend an extra €30? So instead we opt for the free alternative. Heading up the many steps and winding paths, it's not long before we get fantastic panoramas over the old town. A few minutes later, we come across the public footpath which zigzags its way up the hill. Until eventually, every few minutes or so, we are met by the Stations of the Cross. And speaking of cross, yes, it's a bit of a workout, but there are fantastic views which open up along the Dalmatian coast. And after about an hour or so of walking uphill, we finally make it. With the most incredible views onto the old town, up and down the coastline, and the nearby island paradise of Lochram, this is an absolute must-visit spot. But not only that, there's also this cool cross, and a fancy Panorama restaurant where you can dine with the most incredible views. Just a heads up though, you will absolutely need to book a spot in advance if you want a front or a second row table. And before we move on, there is also Fort Imperial, which was built in the early 1800s when Dubrovnik fell briefly under the control of Napoleon's empire. Inside is the Croatian War for Independence Museum, which is dedicated to a war many of you watching may even have remembrance of. This exact hillside would have no doubt been the site of bloody and vicious fighting at one point, as terror was rained down onto the surrounding areas and the old town as the siege of Dubrovnik ensued. But let's move on for now. We'll get back to this later.
Right, it's day 2, it's another early start this morning, but today we're starting off from the opposite side of the old town. So we're on the east side this morning and we've got the Ploče Gate just behind me there, which is probably the main entrance, and the other drawbridge is just hiding just over there. But we're going to go in and explore the old town just in a minute, but first we're going to go this way because there's something I want to show you.
Just a short walk west and only a few minutes away, and we arrive to another lovely little spot.
Well, here we are. This is why we do early starts. We've just came down to the harbour, and if you're a Game of Thrones fan, you might just recognise that pier right there. But also what we're going to do is we're going to head up to that fortress just there, because there's a really good free view, which is obviously a lot more accessible than going up to the top of that mountain hill. Pardon me.
Semantics aside, the West Harbour is such a scenic little spot. But I know another place you need to add to your list. Head up these steps and try not to get splashed.
Just got splashed, be careful.
Then, walk up from the beautiful pearly blue waters, up the rest of the steps until you reach this. Separate from the old town walls is Fort Lovrijenac, which has been developed over the past 1,000 years. And now, it makes for the perfect viewpoint, even just by the entrance, which is of course free by the way. I strongly recommend you come up and take in the scene of the crashing waves against the formidable fortress of Dubrovnik. It truly is hypnotising. And of course you can also enter into the fortress where there's a museum, and I'd imagine a slightly better view. And now at last we can finally rediscover the remaining magic of the old town, heading through Ploče Gate once more, past the counterweights which would have once raised the drawbridge every evening, and then passing through this courtyard, which unsurprisingly was also used in Game of Thrones. Then at last, we finally arrive back into the main part of the old town. To my right, a wonderful 16-sided fountain stands the test of time, after serving fresh water to the city's residents for almost 600 years. Though, it had been restored after a devastating earthquake in 1667, which almost completely destroyed the old town and killed a staggering 3,000 people. Though thankfully, the temporary decline of Dubrovnik wasn't severe enough to stop silly tourists trying to balance on this drain thing. And believe it or not, apparently this is an owl. Anyway, carrying on our way down Stradun again, we head for one of Dubrovnik's most iconic spots. But first we stroll by the numerous side streets containing a variety of bars and restaurants, and the continuous flag holders which would have no doubt lined the main streets in colour many years ago. Moving a little deeper into the medieval streets, we turn the corner to Gundelic Square, And there it is, right in front of us. One of the most iconic spots in the whole city, and yet again, we have it all to ourselves.
Wow. Well, I'm sure if you're a Game of Thrones fan, you do not need me to introduce you to this. But in real life, it is called the Jesuit Steps because there's a church just up there. And as you can see, it's obviously all just been refurbished. It's looking brand new, really. But what a great little spot, eh?
Now, you may be starting to think we have magic superpowers which can make tourists disappear. Unfortunately, we don't. So this is a more appropriate reflection of what it was like through the day. And bearing in mind, it was raining and in April. But even still, apparently this is what exploring before 8 AM gets you. Anyway, at the top of the steps are more fame-hungry birds, which clearly have no shame, and the Jesuit church. It had a slightly beaten but still charming facade. And when we went to check inside, we quickly discovered that they were saving on their electricity bill. And after a free water break, it's time to head to the Maritime Museum, where you can learn more about the history and development of Dubrovnik as a naval power. And as you can see, it also had some thrilling exhibits, like
Knives and forks. We've got a boat.
And we've got a man pointing at his boat.
And we've got some jugs. And a display that should be in Specsavers.
Anyway, let's get out of here. Afterwards, we skip along the city walls and find a really cool little hidden gem. Through this mysterious doorway is a cool rocky outcrop beyond the towering walls of the city. It's the perfect spot for a day like today, where you can gaze off across the Adriatic Sea and pretend you're in Titanic. But seriously, when it's sunny, it's somewhere I would 100% recommend you to add to your list. Finally, we get to explore my favourite building, the centrepiece of the city. The cathedral is relatively simple, though its name anything but. Inside, its interior was relatively modest, yet it still had a charm which is definitely still worth exploring. Afterwards, I take a quick wander next door into Rector's palace, where there's a special something I'd like to show you, though there wasn't much else of interest in the museum, except for these really cool bronze figures from the 15th century, which actually used to strike the bell tower in the main square. Back to the palace, there was a nice little courtyard which was also used as a setting in Karth. Yes, another Game of Thrones reference. But we haven't come in for that. We're interested in this room right here. Inside is a gallery of images from the recent war between 1991 and 1995. In my opinion, it's a must visit. It's rather staggering to see the contrast between the present day and the pain, damage and terror of only 30 years ago. It certainly adds another dimension of perspective as you walk through the streets of this incredible city.
Wow. Well, that marks the end of another adventure, and my god, this place is just incredible. I'm also going to leave some helpful links down below in the description and the comments, so you can do things like Game of Thrones tours and day trips to places like Mount Srd and Montenegro too. I've also got a more complete video for the city walls, which I'll put there, and loads of other videos on my channel which you go and check out if you enjoyed this one. Goodbye.